Today, I am going to start a new book. The book's name is Delog, Journey to the Realms Beyond Death. And it is written by Delog Dawa Drolma. And Drolma means Tara. Translated literally, Dawa is moon and Drolma is female liberator, meaning female liberator of beings. And the introduction to this is written by her son, Chagda Tulku Rinpoche. And Chagda Tulku Rinpoche, he studied in the Nyingma tradition, and he taught extensively in the United States as well as in other parts of the world, and eventually located in Brazil. And he died there quite a few years ago. I can't tell you the exact year that he died, but this is a book that he, as he explains, he brought it from Tibet. The reason why I chose this book is because this book is experiential. We talked about the 6 realms in the Wheel of Life, and also the pure realms. And this was more from an academic standpoint, where this book is from an experiential standpoint. This is what this woman experienced. Another reason I thought it would be good to have a woman author, and she was a highly revered teacher in Tibet too, which must have been fairly unusual, not unheard of, but just unusual. Now, this book too is about Vajrayana Buddhism, not Mahayana Buddhism. This is, well, it's very Tibetan. I think that's a good way to put it. And it's, the world cosmology comes to mind. And so I looked that up. And one definition is a theory or doctrine describing the natural order of the universe. So what this is actually describing the Vajrayana world of pure realms, and then the samsaric world of the 6 realms. So this is right on in that area that this is describing the natural order. Now, a Delog is in the book, in the introduction, described as one who has crossed the threshold of death and returned to tell about it. For 5 days, as she crossed this threshold, she lay, quote, cold, breathless, and devoid of any vital signs. And during this time, then her consciousness left her body and visited these pure realms that I just mentioned, and then the 6 realms of samsara. Much of the time, White Tara escorted her. White Tara actually came to her in a vision and encouraged her to take this. I don't know if trip is the right word, maybe experience. After she returned, after 5 days, and her consciousness re-entered her body, she came back to life. She was already, before this time, had a lot of experience and was revered already, and was born into a family that had, this is an extended family, but an extended family that had a number of Rinpoches and other revered lamas. So after she came back, eventually she described what she had experienced, and a scribe wrote down these oral stories about her experience. She died in 1941, he said, in her mid-30s. And that might seem very young, but for Tibet at that time, that probably was not that young. That might have been, you might say, a time when an average person died. I know I have talked to people that came from Tibet and Nepal and talked about how reaching 40, they felt very old because back then, 40 was considered old. Most people that were born the year you were born, by the time you got to be 40, had already died. So this is an important point to kind of get a reference on how old she was when she died. So as I said, she had a family. She had 4 uncles that are mentioned by name that were revered teachers in Eastern Tibet. This is Kham, and this is where a lot of Kagyus come from. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche is from Kham. The 17th Karmapa was born in Kham. Trangu Rinpoche, Traleg Rinpoche, they're all from Kham. So let's see, she was recognized even before these experiences as an emanation of White Tara, hence the name Dawa Drolma. And he said that she was, after this, when the family would have large ceremonies, he said they would have up to 400 people in the family's tent. Well, that's a huge tent. I wonder if this family's tent was a tent they lived in, or this was a tent that they kept for special occasions. Probably never know. But anyway, that when they would have great ceremonies in this tent, that she would have a throne along with other great lamas, which shows how she was revered and honored. Now, she had, even before her Delog experience, she had dreams and visions due to her realization that none of this was an accident. In these visions, some of them were of White Tara, who gave her teachings and instructions, and in this case, the instructions on how to begin her Delog experience. Chapter 1 goes into this in more detail, but this is kind of an introduction. He mentions that she was courageous. She was 16 years old at the time. And again, just for a reference, a cultural reference, at the age of 16, that was considered time to marry for men or women, boys or girls, depending upon how you look at it. So at 16, that might seem very young and perhaps even immature to us. In that culture, that was not young and immature. But she was courageous because her uncles and her lamas, these masters, they said that it was too dangerous and tried to talk her out of it. But she did it anyway. So that's where this idea of courageous comes from, that it was really a very courageous thing for a girl or a 16-year-old woman to do. One of her lamas, I want to point this out, was Trongé Trungpa, Tromge Trungpa. This is no relationship to a Chogyam Trungpa. It's a name that others were given. My understanding is, and my understanding the Tibetan language is not that good, but I'm going to venture this, that my understanding is that Trungpa means scribe. But so it's important to realize that she did not have a connection with the previous Chogyam Trungpa, that this was a totally different Rinpoche. Not only because of the stories that she told, but also because of this Trongé Trungpa, who saw her come back to life and witnessed all this, and who verified all of this, that this gave her a lot of spiritual authority. On top of that, the stories that she told from meeting deceased people in the Bardo or in the Hell realm, and that she brought back to their relatives, had meaning to them. She would bring back stories, and meet a relative of someone that she met and tell them that this person told me that they have buried money or buried gold or valuables at this particular spot, and the instructions were for you to dig them up, take them to a monastery and have them say prayers for me. The people would do this, find them, and this would cause great faith to arise in their minds. He said that there was one man who, I think he said, had little spiritual interest in the Dharma, that when she approached him with this kind of a situation, and he did find the money, became very serious practitioner of Buddhism. So people had faith and they had respect for her. Now, these instructions that are in this book, a lot of them are about the nature of mind. At one point here at the beginning of the first chapter, she says that she's following Tara's instructions. Quote, I let my mind settle in a spacious and extremely blissful frame of mind. I experienced a state of sheer lucidity. I was fully aware of the fundamental condition of my mind in all its ordinariness. End quote. This is actually instructions on the fundamental nature of our mind. Ordinariness is used in this case to mean that our fundamental essence of our mind is not only blissful and spacious, but it's actually very ordinary because it's unaltered. It's beyond elaboration. And this is actually a problem for most people, is that they think that this fundamental essence of our mind, of the Buddha nature, is in some way or another going to be spectacular. But it's actually very ordinary, and a term that is frequently used is ordinary mind, just bare awareness. So as she does this, following these instructions, where she is fully aware of the fundamental condition of my mind in all its ordinariness, she has supercognition, unimpeded awareness. She says she can hear all sounds from everywhere. Now, it's no accident that she can follow these instructions and have these experiences. What comes to mind is what Taisitu Rinpoche said in the book we just finished studying, and that is that what happens to you has everything to do with you. So what she was experiencing had to do with karma from her previous lives. It has to do with her training in her present life, her devotion, her faith, the retreats that she did before she was 16, that all of this is due to her effort in her present life and her past life. And basically what she was experiencing was Buddha nature. And what she, you might say, saw, the visions that she had, were the display of the mind. Here is another quote. And the pure realms she visited are the rich display of the nature of mind, experienced when meditation breaks through the limitations of ordinary perception. And here we have ordinary used in a different way. And ordinary perception is dualistic perception, where there is a perceiver and a perceived and the act of perception. And this is beyond that. And as it said, it's because of meditation. And this is both sitting meditation and then deity meditation, mantra, chanting and counting, and so on and so forth, visualizations. So meditation here is used in a much broader sense. You could say practice. So even though these pure realms are the display of the mind, from another perspective, these are emanated realms of enlightened beings, and the enlightened beings emanate these realms for the benefit of sentient beings. And actually, the way deity practice works is that we start out by seeing these pure realms and the deities in them as being separate from ourselves. And we visualize ourselves as the deity. And then as we do these practices over and over again, repeatedly, gradually, we accumulate merit and we accumulate wisdom, receive the blessings of these external deities, and the division between us and these external deities gradually dissolves. And you become the deity, and these pure realms become the, quote, rich display of the nature of mind. So that's why there's these two different approaches, but they're really not separate approaches. They're just, you might say, different stages of the path. The first chapter begins with Padmasambhava's Pure Land, the copper-colored mountain. Later, then, she goes to Chenrezi's land of Dewa Chen, and then to Tara's Pure Land, Ulokod. And again, these are the rich display of mind from one perspective. From another perspective, there are these pure lands that these deities create for us sentient beings. Then she visits the six realms. And these are the display of the mind again, when the mind is mixed with delusion and the poisons of the mind. She also visits the bardo. Chagda Tulku Rinpoche mentions that in the bardo, beings in the bardo, if they recognize that the display in the bardo is their own mind, and they invoke their yidam, they are liberated into a pure realm. So he then lists the six realms and the poison of the mind or the afflictive emotion that is associated with them. And he mentions that in the human realm, it's a mix of all five poisons with enough virtue to prevent birth in the lower realms. And to just review that very, very briefly, the hell realm is considered the lowest realm because it has the greatest degree of suffering in it, and it is anger that causes one to be reborn in that realm. The next realm, the one that has a little less suffering, is the hungry ghost or the preta realm, and it is greed, that extreme desire, you could say, that causes one to be reborn there. The animal realm, it is stupidity, indifference, apathy, and so forth, that is the predominant poison of the mind that causes rebirth there. There are two God realms. The highest God realm, it is arrogance that causes one to be reborn there. Oh, well, it's along with a lot of merit, a lot of good karma, a lot of virtuous activity. And then the lower God realm is the jealous God realm. And again, it takes a lot of good karma to be reborn there, but it's mixed with jealousy. And so in the human realm, we have all of those. We have arrogance, we have jealousy, we have indifference, we have greed, and we have anger. But enough virtue to avoid getting reborn in a lower realm, the animal realm, hell realm, hungry ghost realm. Now, he describes her experience as dreamlike, with beings floating in and out. I believe he used the analogy of snowflakes. And in this part of the country, we don't even have to imagine snowflakes. We have a pretty good experience with them. And there are many different scenes that occur throughout this book. And again, one reason why I chose this book and that he mentions in this introduction is that it helps us understand these teachings, helps us increase our confidence, our faith, our diligence. It can inspire a person to practice deity meditation, inspire one to want to realize the nature of mind. And you might say the other side of the coin is that it also shows the consequence of harmful actions, specifically killing and harming others. And through this, it encourages people to avoid these kinds of actions. So here's a little biographical information about Dawa Drolma. She was in the Sakya lineage. There are 4 lineages in Tibetan Buddhism, and Sakya is one of them, and that was the lineage that she was in, and a lama in. And after her Delog experience, she did a pilgrimage to Lhasa with a consort, a high lama. And his name is, I had to look on the internet for this, Sarah Kato Tolku. And he was in the Delog lineage. The Delog is the lineage that the Dalai Lama is associated with. And during that pilgrimage, she became pregnant. And after that, she went to her parents and lived there for 4 years. Now, this is after she had these experiences. Then she moved to a monastery where they built a house, a special house for her. And she was revered as a Dakini. And what this means is, quote, a female embodiment of wisdom and enlightened activity. So as he keeps mentioning, she was highly revered and respected. He said that when she was a child, almost right from the beginning, that she was compassionate, would give her possessions to the needy, and of course make offerings to the 3 jewels. And there is an autobiography that Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche wrote, and he was much the same way about giving away possessions, having compassion for the needy, and not having a lot of care for his having enough. So his mother, Dawa Drolma, she had a daughter later who was recognized as a, quote, wisdom Dakini. And Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche himself that his last life was the 16th incarnation of his line. And what came to mind as I am putting this talk together is that one of the short prayers that we do is that may we be reborn in a family that will keep us closely connected to the gurus. As you can see by his 4 uncles, his mother, his sister, and then himself, that there were a lot of highly realized beings in this family. And it was a very dharmic situation, a very fortunate situation to be born into. But again, it wasn't an accident, that it was all about their karma and what they had done in previous lives. And Chagda Rinpoche says that she had a strong influence on his spiritual training. He said that she did not, quote, refrain from inflicting strict discipline, end quote. But on the other hand, she also encouraged him to practice with pure motivation and to be of benefit to others. And that, of course, is what pure motivation is being motivated to study, practice, contemplate, and so forth, so that you can be of benefit to others. She died in 1941, as I said, in her mid-30s, and she remained in meditation posture for, quote, some days. And this is a sign of realization. Dying in meditation posture, and then even though all signs of life have ceased and the body becomes cold, that the person remains in that posture. The 16th Karmapa did that too. I take that back. He did not, I think he had cancer and was not able to sit in meditation posture. But this is what's called the final meditation. And you draw consciousness into your heart center chakra. And so the limbs go cold, but the heart center remains warm. And the Karmapa did that too. And then when finally you're ready, consciousness leaves. And if you're in meditation posture, you fall over, which is what happened in her case. And then when they cremated her, there were rainbows in the sky, which again is a indication of an enlightened being. And he said there were 5 vultures that circled the sky, again, which was considered an auspicious sign. He used the word symbolizing the supreme perspective of a realized yogini. What that means is that a vulture sees from above, and he has a much larger vision of what's happening. Whereas on the ground, your vision is much less. So a yogini or a yogi with this supreme perspective are seeing you might say, the bigger picture, the broader view. Perhaps different from this country, vultures there are viewed positively. They have a positive opinion in the human realm. Chagda Tulku Rinpoche left Tibet in 1959, fleeing from the Chinese. And this book that was written of her mother's experience was left behind. And at this time, then the Cultural Revolution happened, and most of the Tibetan Buddhist texts were destroyed by the Chinese. And he was concerned about that, but he said that in 1982, his sister, who he hadn't heard from since he had fled in 1959, wrote and said that she had a copy of the book, the only copy of the book. And before he could go pick it up, the Chinese came and took it, but did not destroy it. And she bribed an official and got it back. I believe he used the word an exorbitant bribe. And then in 1987, he visited her and picked it up. And he said that he had brought some other texts with him. He originally wanted to just photocopy it, but he couldn't do that. And so as a backup plan, brought other Tibetan texts, and he just put these other Tibetan texts along with this text. And when he went through customs, there was no problem. Again, this is something that probably most of you are aware of this, especially if you've been over to that part of the world. But government officials in customs and other places are, shall we say, they will take bribes many times. So this was not something that was uniquely his. His sister was able to bribe an official and get the text, but this was common. If you had money, and it's still that way in India, China, Nepal. At least that's my experience. So anyway, it turned out that there was a fifth chapter of the book that he did not bring back, but his sister later did come to the United States and brought that fifth chapter out. And that was in, I think in 99, 97. Oh, it was Chagda Tulku Rinpoche's son that brought it out. He married a Tibetan woman. I'm not sure at what age, but he married a Tibetan woman and had a son, and may have had more children. I'm really not sure. And he actually wrote an autobiography, and he talks about that marriage, and it broke up, and he actually was a divorced Tibetan Tulku. He was not a monk. And eventually he came to this country. And when he came to this country, he married an American woman. So he had an interesting life. His autobiography is Lord of the Dance, and that makes interesting reading too. And in there, I recall him talking about how one of the problems with the marriage was that he kept giving away belongings, and his wife didn't want them to be given away, which kind of mirrors the story that he tells about his mother, who people that were living with her would hide their belongings because they were afraid that she would give them away if she found them. So, what you say, like a mother. Now, he says this, and it's really, to me anyway, quite obvious that a Delog experience is a sign of great meditative realization. And she was having these visions before she had the Delog experience. So that's a very important point. And he mentions that Delog were often women, that this is not something that only men do, and then she just happened to be a woman, that it was more women that had these experiences than men. And many appear to, that have this experience, appear to be ordinary lay people. In Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about, not necessarily about the Delog experience, but that many highly realized beings you would not recognize as a highly realized being. They may look very ordinary, or perhaps even lower than ordinary. They wouldn't necessarily be monastic. They wouldn't necessarily be recognized as a teacher. So again, that's an important point to make. All four lineages have Dalogs in them. Khenpo Karta Rinpoche, he, at least on one occasion, talked about knowing a Delog back there when he was in Trangu Monastery in Tibet. And Chagda Tulku Rinpoche mentions that this Library of Tibetan Classics has a number of books that are not translated into English about Dalogs and their experience. And to kind of finish up this chapter, I want to re-emphasize that this book is experiential. This is about the experiences she had when her consciousness left her body, guided by White Tara. And he ends with, quote, "I trust that those who read it will find that the phenomena of the realms correspond to aspects of their own mind's experience." The question is, I don't understand what was meant by enlightened beings create pure lands for the benefit of beings. This goes into what are called the three bodies of the Buddha. And you have the Dharmakaya, which is formless. This is for your own benefit. It's beyond time, it's beyond space, it has no form, it's beyond description. But because of your motivation to benefit beings, you will manifest a form body. And one of the form bodies is made out of light. This is the Sambhogakaya, and these are the deities that we are familiar with: Chenrezi, White Tara, Green Tara, and so forth. And so these deities, and then the Pure Land where they abide, are created for the benefit of other beings. And as you can see with Dawa Drolma, that she had these visions, you might say, or visitations of White Tara and others in the Sambhogakaya realm. And in the first chapter, which we will start next week, she will describe what these pure lands look like. But ultimately, they are our own mind. And the instructions in the Bardo is that if you recognize what you are experiencing as your own mind and visualize yourself as a deity, you become the deity and you end up in the Pure Land. An approach that I have had right from the beginning with this Vajrayana Buddhism is that a lot of it is just so foreign to my experience, my culture here in the United States. And when I don't understand things, which is common, frequent, to kind of put it aside and rather than say, this can't be, to say, well, I'm going to wait, maybe investigate, ask questions before I make a decision on this. But little by little, as we practice more and have more teachings and contemplate things, that our understanding deepens, our realization, even if it's a little bit, increases. And slowly, 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 it starts opening up. The question is, could you talk a little bit about emanation bodies and how that comes about? And what the teachings say is that as you progress in your realization, there are what are called the 10 bhumis or the 10 levels. And they are described in great detail. And I don't have time to go into it, and I don't have it all memorized either. But as you progress on these bhumis to higher and higher levels, you are able to emanate bodies to benefit other beings. In the, you might say, classic biographies of the great masters of the past, they talk about some of them being able to emanate. And through these emanations, then they benefit other beings, are more able to benefit other beings. So to continue on about emanations, that there are different forms of emanation. Frequently, a great realized teacher, and in this case, Drolma, Dawa Droma, they will say they're an emanation of Tara or an emanation of Chenrezig. Karmapa and the Dalai Lama are considered an emanation of Chenrezig. So that is one form of emanation, and that these deities could emanate as a human being, they could emanate as a plant, they could emanate as an animal, and so on and so forth, as an object to benefit beings in some way or another. And you have to remember, this is coming from originally the Dharmakaya manifesting in the Sambhogakaya, which is made out of light, and then into an actual, what we confused human beings call a physical object. This is what most emanations are talking about. What else I was thinking of was that in the biography of people like Milarepa, there was bilocation, where his physical body would be here, and then he would be somewhere else.
At the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.